So it's not been updated. Yeah.
So it seemed pretty promising then, according to what I'm picking up from you.
Yeah, it's got lots of potential. It's got like foil wallpaper and stuff like that. So got to deal with that. Hello. Okay, thank you, bye. That was Aubrey telling me where the closing statement was.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We have got the notification that we are live. So welcome everybody to our weekly live training that we do right here in the Facebook group every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. And tonight, just like every Wednesday night, we got an exciting show for you and kind of a weird topic here. Recently, which by the way, guys, help us out and drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Say hello, and we'll give you a shout out as well. But recently, Ray and one of his former students were recently cashed out of 2 subject to deals, and they were forced against their will to put about $125,000 in their pocket, and they were quite upset about it. It was a bad day for them. And so we're going to talk about why that is. Most people would think, man, that's decent money. We can reinvest it. But the idea of tonight is how to acquire subject to properties and keep them as long as you can. So Ray, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, James. Just running 100 miles an hour. So, but other than that, doing fine.
Yeah, I think we all are. That's part of real estate. 100 miles an hour in 100 different directions.
People will say, like, why don't you retire? And it's like, well, why would you? What is there to retire from? You when you actually make this thing start working, it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, they always say when you love what you do, you never work another day in your life.
Right. There's some times it wears you out, but I mean, overall, it's like just having kind of control of your day and deciding when you get up in the morning where you're going, what problems you're going to work on, what properties, what issues you're going to work on. I just love that. I love that. When I first started my working career, I basically joined the service for 4 years, and then I worked for a large corporation for 10 years. And once you go through that, you're never going to go back to that, because it's like, be there at 8, leave at 5, unless they want you to work overtime, which you can never say no to. And of course, everybody knows what the military is like. So you get a healthy respect for that. And then when you get another option, like having free will and being autonomous and getting to do what you want within reason, I mean, you still got to make deadlines, and you still got to get things done, and you're still going 100 miles an hour, and your hair's on fire a lot of time. But it's my life. And that's what I love about real estate. It gave me power over my life. It's like me investing in the stock market. People say, well, why don't you buy stock? And it's like, because I can't control that. I don't have any control over that whatsoever. There's somebody else making decisions with information and knowledge they have that I don't understand. And I'm just, the heck with that. I'm going to live my life on my terms. And I've been doing that for 38 years. And no regrets.
Hi, Tina. Hi, Ernie. Kenneth, hello. How are you guys doing? As you guys come on, drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We're, like I mentioned before, we're going to talk about a couple of subject to deals. Can you give a little bit of intro? Can you kind of jump into the deals that we're going to be talking about tonight?
And I'll be honest, I haven't done a lot of research on those, but they're real deals. They just unwound. Both of those deals unwound in the last couple of months. And one of them was a relatively large deal. One was kind of a small deal. One we probably netted a little bit over 100K, and the other one, according to Aubrey, she told me we netted 26K on that. Both of those had positive cash flows the whole time we had them. And the worst thing is they paid us off, because I didn't want them to pay us off, because when you get the money, then what are you going to do with it? I don't want the money sitting in a bank account. I don't want to pay taxes on it. I want that money to keep growing. And that's, once you get to your financial freedom number, you'll see that your priorities change, and it's like, no, don't pay me off. It's like bizarre for me to say, don't give me the money. And it's like, I don't want the money. I don't want the money. The money is the last thing I want.
Mhm. So when you say on that one, you netted a little over 100, and then the other one you netted a little over 25 or 26. Now, is that what you just recently got, or do you add the cash flow on top of that?
No, we had the cash flow, they were both sub twos. Both of them were wraparounds. And of course, it took me 10 years to figure out how to do a sub two right. And in fact, you never stop learning how to do the complicated stuff right, because the rules keep changing. But there's some basic things that a lot of investors don't get right. And until they get burned by them, or until they have a close friend like I have close friends burned because they don't do them right, then you're still learning. You never stop learning. So you always got to be a good student of that process. And but both those deals we had for a while, we made positive cash flows, and unfortunately, they paid off both of those deals. And that's the part we didn't like. Now, there's certain things that I don't want to probably talk about it tonight on an open forum like this, but there's certain things that we can do to encourage the people not to pay us off. But I mean, when you're doing a wraparound, that's the risk you take. Now, if it's a rental, then you don't get paid off, and that's good, because then you just keep the cash flow. But having rentals is a problem too.
So just to clear things up, because there may be some people on here want to know what exactly is wraparound. Okay, and so the way I understand it is you do a subject to, it's got an underlying mortgage, and then you sell or finance it to a buyer, and you just wrap the mortgage around the existing mortgage.
That's exactly what it is. It's the sub two is the mortgage in place, and a wraparound goes to it. Of course, then that means that the sub two is the underlying. But basically, you have a mortgage, and then you have a second lien that kind of wraps around that lien and the other lien. And it very common, just in real simple terms, real simple math. You might have a mortgage that's 100,000, or you might have taken over a mortgage that's 100,000. So then what you do is, I might turn around and sell it to you, James, for 150,000. So the sub two is the underlying mortgage, and the wraparound is the 150,000 mortgage. And then when you start playing with the math, and if you want to, we can drill down a little bit in the math. I don't think this is a good format here, but we can at least talk about how some of the math works. But you're getting a spread between the interest rate, between the difference in the underlying interest rate. Well, there's two areas you make money. You're getting a spread between the underlying interest rate and the interest you charge. So if the underlying interest rate is 5% and the interest rate you charge is 1%, then that's your spread. Okay, so and just think about this: 1% on $100,000 is $1,000 a year. So that's what, about $88 a month. So that for every interest point on every 100,000, it's $88 a month, more or less. So if it's 3%, then it'd be 3 times 88. So if the underlying is 5 and the wrap amount is 8, then you got a 3% spread. 3 times 88 is, I don't know, 268 or 264. So all of a sudden now you've got that 264 per 100K. So if it's 200K wrap, then it's $630 more or less. And you see how by doing that wrap, and that's one source of where the money comes from on a wraparound. The other source is you have equity. So in that scenario I gave you, it's 100K underlying, 150K wraparound. There's a 50K that doesn't have an underlying. So now I'm getting the full 8% on that 50K. So 8 times 50 is what, $4,000 a year. And if you divide that by 12, I don't know what that comes up to, $350. I don't know, $350. No, but it's somewhere in there, $300+. So now my interest on that part is $300 plus per 100,000. If that makes sense. No,
Yeah.
it's per the equity, so it'd be 50,000 is equity. And then it's 8% on the 50,000, which is $4,000 per year. Right?
Yeah. So from what I've just heard is you can make money on the price, the sales price spread and the equity, and you can actually collect interest on the full equity part. And then you can also make money on the interest spread.
Right. And that's called
So right there, that's just two ways to make money and increase your profit right there on a creative financing deal versus
just imagine, like when you start this, you go through this process, there's a lot of smoke, right? A lot of shuffling around chairs and doing things, fixing up the property. But after the smoke clears, after you take this thing into inventory and then you put it out and put it in your portfolio, right? Which means you gotta find the seller, then you gotta do things to the house, and then you gotta find the buyer. So that's the smoke. Once you clear up that smoke, once you go through that process, then this is what that's the end product that you have. So you start with these loose pieces, you put them together, the smoke clears, and then what you're ending up with is a cash flow. And the cash flow is based on primarily on those two numbers. Now, how much does it take to buy the property? How much does it take to fix up the house? How much do you get as a down payment? How do you market the property? How do you optimize the outcome? That's kind of, I don't want to say it's a secret sauce, but it's the kind of thing that you don't just wake up one day and know how to do, because you might not be optimizing something. You might not be getting the maximum amount of dollars for doing it one way versus the other. You might be doing too much in the way of repairs. You might be selling it for too much. It sits on the market too long. You might not be efficient where you get the work done quickly and knocked out. So there's a lot of ways to screw this up. And trust me, I know most of them because I have personal experience with them. And I'm like a tyrant in our office because when one of those ways are looming on the horizon that we're screwing it up on, then I'm a hellraiser, because that's my profitability depends on me doing a lot of these things right. If we're working with students, like in this case, both these deals were with Charles, it's like, okay, Charles, we're both got to be rowing this boat. We got to be hitting it hard, and we've got to make sure we're not doing making any of those mistakes. And that's not to mention to do the wraparound properly and to do the to do the sub two properly. You got to make sure you're doing your basic documents right, along with doing the transaction right. Some guys, for example, we're doing a deal right now where the people got in it, some partners got in it, and before you know it, it's a runaway. The costs are just running away from us. And if I would have been able to intervene earlier, and I should have, but I was just too busy. And it's, I'm going to accept full responsibility, but I should have intervened earlier. And we just said, look, this cost is getting out of hand. Let's just change our exit strategy. So it's sometimes, they say the best laid battle plans fail at first sight of the enemy. Sometimes that's what happens. We get in these deals and we say, well, here's our exit strategy. We get in there. All of a sudden, there's all kinds of issues and problems that we weren't expecting. We should have went into our exit strategy sooner and not waited so long. And all it means is we're just not going to make as much money, but we're still going to do just fine with it.
So, where are some good sources and where can we find some of these types of leads? Where is a good place to look for leads of these kinds of deals?
So we're doing sub two. It's always going to be, everything starts with a motivated seller. And so the question is, where's a motivated seller? I mean, the burial grounds that like where all the hidden treasures are, like on the sub twos, for example, a very common place is foreclosures. And I mean, I don't want to say I've probably impressed you, but James, you're probably impressed how much I know about title search and how to find out who owns a property and how to clear up title and those issues. It's not like I woke up one day and decided I wanted to be an expert at that. It's just that's where the gold mines are. That's where the gold's buried, or where their diamond's buried in. So foreclosures is a really good place. Probate's a really good place. And we just have to know how to find those, where to find them. And then we have to know how to unravel them. But that's a perfect example. A lady that works in our office, we're trying to close, we're trying to buy the property from her because her parents died and there's a title issue. And it's like pulling teeth to fix that title issue, and she's cooperating with it. And it's still a struggle because of this, and I don't want to go into specifics, but it's a family kind of thing, and we're trying to work with a family member that doesn't know how to be worked with. So, but we've got to figure out how to overcome those things, because ultimately that represents to us cash flow. And if we can solve it, we get, remember, financial freedom numbers basically how to have passive income that replaces your income, your working income. And when you get in that position, your whole attitude, instead of give me money, it's like, don't give me money, give me more cash flow. How do I convert those big deposits into monthly payments? And that's, to me, when you reach that place, you're in a good place. You finally got there. That's where you want to go. So in this case, like in her case, I look at it like, if I solve that problem, it's going to add $300 or $400 a month cash flow. So that's what I do. And so I'm having to overcome a title issue, a human being issue, having to overcome that to create that $300 a month cash flow for 10, 20, 30 years.
So when you're talking to a seller and you're looking at a lead or a potential deal, what are some things to look for in some signals or some triggers to say, this would probably be a really good subject to deal?
Okay, so there's some rules of thumbs on that. That's a really good question, James, because sometimes if they fit like a certain template, like, okay, that fits that template, let's really, really try hard. One is if they're motivated, if they have a real quick window of time, if you can solve their problem that doesn't require you to pay off the mortgage. Those are some of the things. What are some more?
What about the payoff versus the ARV and also the interest rate?
Yeah, in fact, I thought of that right when you asked the question, and it slipped my mind, but that's the perfect one. I don't know what the math is. In fact, I was helping a guy who's generating leads all over the country, and he wanted to know the math. And it's like, hey, I can't tell you what the math is, but I know it when it feels right. And there is a ratio. So let's say that you have to bring the person owes 50,000 that they'll let you take over the, and I'm going to use kind of small numbers, but you can add zeros to this or double it or triple it. It all works out. The ratio is pretty important. So let's say that they have there's the balance is 95,000 and they need $5,000. So you're going to pay them $5,000, take over a $95,000 loan. That makes sense all day long. But let's say that they need $50,000 and there's a $50,000 loan. So you're going to take over $50,000 and come up with $50,000. At some point, that ratio of how much you have to come as it relates to what the mortgage you're taking over, you kind of lose the benefit. So like if I'm using expensive money and inexpensive money. So the part I'm taking over, let's say, tends to be inexpensive. And there are exceptions to that. But let's say that money's we're paying rent at the rate of 4% per month. Well, if I need 50,000 to make that work, to capture 50,000, and that money costs 8 to 10%, I kind of lose the value of that, because then you get what's essentially a blended rate. So if you got 50,000 at 4%, and you got to bring another 50,000 at 8%, your blended rate is 6%. And then it's like, okay, the cost of money is 6%. I got to deal with the sub 2. Maybe I'm a lot better off just bringing the $100,000 at 8%, because then if I'm bringing 100,000 at 8%, my lender, if I'm using a private lender or hard money lender, now they are in a first lien position. So it's a lot easier to attract money when it's in a first lien position. A lot of people, rightfully so, won't put money in as a second lien. So and then the other thing is, a lot of times if it's a small amount of money, you can handle that. You know, you have that kind of money around. A lot of people have that money around, or a lot of people that will JV with you. So that's, you know, smaller amounts of money makes it easier. If I was a wholesaler, and we do wholesaling, but not on purpose, we just do wholesaling to keep the machine going, to keep the leads coming in. But if I was intentionally a wholesaler, the more I can package these creative deals, and the less money that the buyer has to bring to the table, the more I can sell that same product. And give you an example, if I get a sub-2 where the person needs to pay my wholesale fee and pay, say, $5,000 to the seller, let's say my wholesale fee, the average wholesale fee on single family houses is around 10,000 in our market. You know, sometimes it's a lot higher. Sometimes it's you know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000. So let's say it's 10,000. So I have a wholesale fee of 10,000 plus I'm having to take over a $5,000 debt to pay the seller, and then I can take over the $95,000. I'm sorry, the $5,000 obligation, and then take over a $95,000 debt. That has a lot more potential buyers because I'm needing to come to the table with 15K, right? 10K for the wholesaler, 5K for the seller, and take over the 95. So now a lot more people can come to the table and be interested in that property. If I, as a wholesaler, went out there and said, hey, I'll just buy the property for 100,000 cash, you've just cut your potential buyers down by 1,000%. I mean, you just literally now, instead of 5 or 6 out of 10 people being able to pull it off, now you might have 1 or 2 people out of 10. So the easier it is to bring buyers to the table, the easier it is, and the more you're going to make on your deals. So even if you're a wholesaler and you're not learning creative ways and other alternative ways and how to convert, how to negotiate better, you need to pick up your game in that, because it means ultimately your product's going to be more valuable.
So how can somebody that's wholesaling transition into this area, other than, I mean, obviously learning about it, but how can, like, if I was a wholesaler and I wanted to partner with you on the subject too, because I want to transition that, what would that look like in Europe?
Ask the question again, because I think you I'm not clear on the question because you kind of asked it 2 different ways.
Okay, well, we have a lot of you know, people in our group are wholesaling, and you know, if they want to venture, you know, go through wholesaling and get to doing these creative deals, what would that look like for a wholesaler to get to the point? And I put myself in that position. If I'm a wholesaler and I wanted to do one of these deals with you, what would that look like?
Can I answer the question differently? Because like on one hand, you're asking like how to JV with us. And then the other question is like, if I'm a wholesaler, forget the JV, how do I maximize the best outcome for me? Which is ultimately what is, you know, the best. You're better off not JVing with people if you don't need to. Now, if you're not confident on how to put it together, you're not confident how to fix a property, you're not confident that you're going to do the negotiation right, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table, or you need somebody to bring money to the table, then JV makes sense. And so like somebody that's doing their first 10 deals, JV, I don't think you can go wrong with JV with people. It just, there's so many things you don't know. I don't think you can go wrong with JV. And I know that sounds like a self-serving statement, but as a person that's gone through the first 10 deals, and I look back at how incredibly slow I was, how many times I screwed up, how I almost went out of business, how my first rehab took almost a year, you know, and the deal we did with Charles, we had the sub-2 wraparound done literally in 2 weeks. We had that done in 2 weeks, and it took me 10 years to figure out how to do that. So Charles just cut off 9 years and 50 weeks in the learning curve. And he doesn't know all the stuff I knew, but he knew enough to know that he was going to stay out of trouble. So in some regards, JVing with people makes a lot of sense. But if you're gonna just look at it like say, I'm the guy, I'm looking, taking care of my stakeholders, my family. How do I do this? What's the best way to do it? So it's kind of like two different things going on and they're competing with each other, because if you fail, then you're not doing yourself any favors. So, or if you set it up wrong, or you don't get the right documents at closing. And a lot of times attorneys don't know what these documents are because they're not investors and they haven't seen all the mistakes that a seasoned investor can make. So I would venture to say, even the sub-twos, even the attorneys that prepare sub-two documents, until you're the guy that's trying to make that work in the back office, until you're paying that underlying mortgage of hundreds of, we've literally paid thousands of sub-two mortgages payments, until you're that person, you don't learn the lessons that life is handing out. You know, an attorney doesn't learn that, you know, because they're not making it. They're not the investor. If they are an investor doing sub-twos, they're doing it almost all, with the exception of one or two people I know, almost all attorneys are doing it on such a small scale that they're just not going to be great advisors for you. But if you're doing it, then how do you ramp this up, and how do you do creative deals so that you can hold on to some of the deals? And as a wholesaler, the theory, I think, is the only reason to be a wholesaler is to help you get to your financial freedom number, which means financial freedom number means holding on to deals. Wholesaler means letting all the deals go. So those are conflicts of interest, right? But eating is more important than reaching your financial freedom number. So if you're like in eating mode, how do I make that happen? And if there's a hybrid, it's like, how do I get some sub-twos and hold on to those? How do I do some wholesale deals and make money to eat with? So there's some variables there, but how do I do the wholesales and make money to keep with eat with? Well, you can do a JV and still make a wholesale fee. A lot of the wholesalers never asked to do a JV. They never entice that other person on the other side that has the solutions. I never ask them to JV. And if I'm the wholesaler, I would, James, if I was wholesaling property to you, I'd say like, hey, how can we JV on this? I know you're bringing the experience. I know you're bringing the money, but I am bringing the deal. And I don't want to give up everything just on a paltry little front end wholesale fee, right? So you can ask, you should always ask. The other thing is a wholesaler or a person that's doing the sub-twos and the wraparound, you should always have 20 or 30 deals in the mix at all times. And if you have 20 or 30 deals in the mix, and if you're able to pop a wholesale fee per month, that's probably enough for almost everybody on this phone call to live on. And that's what you should live on. And if some of those deals can go in wholesale fee, or they can go buy and hold. And if you get a deal that's a buy and hold, and you got your wholesale deals that are popping on a regular basis, then put some of those in the buy and hold thing. Don't go and do the wholesales and go buy a friggin' Bentley. You know, there was somebody posting, some wholesalers bragging about the Bentley they're buying, and I'm thinking they're throwing away their future. They're just guaranteeing they're going to stay on that hamster wheel for the rest of their life. And if the market changes and the rules change, they're not going to be on the hamster wheel anymore, because it's going to spit them out and they're going to die. That's why we survived 2007, because we had assets. We had properties that we were holding on to. The wholesalers all went out of business in 2007. Several times in my life, the vast majority of wholesalers went out of business, because without assets, you're just working.
So the moral of that is to try to have a balance to where you may, wholesale 2 or 3 of your deals, but you try to keep 4 or 5 of your deals at the same time. And that way you still eat, but and you still do your marketing, but you can also be building your portfolio and your cash flow.
I think the way to look at it is like, I'm gonna hold on to every house I get. And so what if 9 out of 10 you have to wholesale? At least you got a plan. I'm holding on to every house. And when you start trying to solve that problem, how do I hold on to this house? How do I get the money up front and hold on to the house at the same time? You'll be surprised how many ways there are to do that. And it's not a problem you're going to solve unless you make a commitment to solve that problem. And the commitment should be, I want to figure out how to hold on to every freaking deal I touch for the rest of my life. With some exceptions, that deal that you made that huge wholesale fee on a few years back, that was not a good property to hold on. That's not a buy and hold. That's a perfect wholesale property, right? It's a property we don't want tied to us. So give it to somebody else, get your wholesale fee and move on. But my goal would be look for the properties you want to hold on to, work on those times. Like, do you want to be a wholesaler in the hood type properties that you can't make work? And there's some strategies to make those work, but they're harder to make work. And if the answer is you don't want to hold on to those properties, then don't wholesale those properties. Be a wholesaler on the kinds of properties you want to hold on. And when you start trying to really solve how do I hold on to this property, I'd rather hold on to half of a property or a tenth of a property or a third of a property than to just get the wholesale fee and then be out of it, especially if it's a good property. And it is, until you buy a property for $50,000 and then later on you sell it for $150,000 and you didn't do anything, I don't think you'll understand it, but it happens. And what the longer it sits there, the more it's worth. In the market that I'm in, values went up 21% across the board on rental on properties that people held. So that's a lot of money. That's more money. 21%, say on a $100,000 house, 21% is a $20,000 increase in value. Now, how much is that? If you collected $1,000 a month rent, that's $12,000. You made almost twice as much money in the increase in value than you did in the rent you collected. Now that's unusual. Yeah, it's unusual, but guess what? All those people that are sitting on those properties, they're becoming the millionaires. And the guy that's giving them away and selling them to me, I appreciate it. All I can say is thank you.
So what are some of the risks that we can overcome? And this is another two-headed question here. But what are some of the risks as an investor and also as a seller to do a subject to?
You got to do it. The big risk is you'll do it wrong and you'll lose control of the property. It's got to be clear that you're taking over the existing mortgage, and it's got to be clear that the seller understands that. And we used to be lackadaisical on that, and we're not lackadaisical on that anymore. And life tends to teach you and straighten you out if you survive. And you just basically make sure that everybody is signing complete disclosures. They know what's going on. There is a downside risk on sub-twos. You may end up finding that you have to pay off. And that's why we don't like, there's people out there that teach doing sub-twos and paying full market value. We think that's a mistake. And I am so confident that it's a mistake. We're not going to take those risks. And what gives me that confidence is 2 times in my career, and I've seen the people doing sub-twos with low margins. And when the market changes, they're begging people to take those sub-twos off their hands because there's not enough cash flow. If the property goes empty, there's just not enough equity to get rid of it. There's hardly any way to make money with it. So be very careful. There's people that teach doing sub-twos at 100% of market value, and we're pretty much against that. I think I would do those under the right conditions, but it would be the exception, not the rule.
So is there a general rule of thumb for the necessary margin that would make sense to do the subject to?
Well, if you look at FHA loans, the FHA loans, you put somewhere between, normally the financing is about 95 cents on the dollar. And then by the time you add in the loan costs and stuff, it's even higher. It could be 97, 98, 99 cents on the dollar. Those in bad times fail across the board at high volume. The people that put 20% down on a conventional loan and they're taking over 80, those almost never go bad. People almost never default on that. And a lot of it's because people can get out of those houses. They can get away from them. They can put them on the market, they can sell them, they have a lot of options. So I would say, I don't know what the right number is on that. If it's in the path of path of progress and values are going up, there's high demand, lots of private ownership, easy to rent it or easy to own or finance it, then you can be closer to that ARV number. If it's in the hood, it's a difficult property, it has defaults or defects, then I think you want to play it safe. You want to be lower on that number. Another factor in it is the cost of your money. There's always going to be a spread in the difference between what the cost of your money is, what you're on the underlying loan on the sub 2, and what that property will earn in rates of return. So if it has, say, a cap rate of 5 and your cost of money is 3%, then that's a 2% spread, because cap rate is based on value and net operating income, the total operating income. So as long as there's a spread, I think that you can get closer and closer to that value. There's that always going to be that secondary let me turn this dang thing off. There's always going to be the secondary market that's not going to be able to get the best interest rates. So you got the A1 borrowers and you got everybody else, and that spread is what protects you. So if you have a decent spread, then you can get closer to the ARV without worrying about it. Right now, the spread is just unbelievable. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, you can borrow money 3, 4, 5%, and you can loan it out at 8, 9, 10%. So that's a huge spread. So honestly, if you're sleeping at night, I think you just throwing away a great opportunity. You should stop sleeping and start working on this, because that spread is what will make you millionaires.
Are you saying sleep is overrated? We don't need to sleep.
Sleep is for people that are dying. Those are for people in nursing homes.
All right, guys, we got about probably 10, 12 minutes left. Then we're going to wrap up. This is some exciting stuff, how you can maximize your wholesaling fees and get to your final freedom number. You want to know how you can JV with us and know what kind of joint venture opportunities that we have, drop a comment below and say JV, and I'll reach out to you guys tomorrow and give you some more information on how we can JV, because we're always looking for deals to JV on and buy, and so are our students. So drop that comment JV if you want to know how to joint venture with us. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit more, Ray. Is there any specific advice that you want to give some of our listeners that are just getting into this part of real estate as far as the creative financing?
I think creative financing doesn't actually, and I think it's there's a book called like Invest in Debt by Jimmy Napier, which I just love that book, and I read that book. It was hard to read. It was only about maybe 80 pages or 100 pages. And then since I love that book so much, Jimmy passed away, but I probably bought 200 books from him, and I just used to give that out to my friends. And I think you can get it on Amazon, but it's worth going into. It's worth seeing things. What you need to do, James, is maybe set up a time where we can do like a class on understanding present value and future values, and learning how the math works. It's kind of tough when you first get exposed to it, but if you hear it, it's like most things in real estate, really most things in life. It doesn't really sink in the first time you hear it, but you hear it 5 or 6 times, and it starts making a lot more sense. And so let's think about doing a class on using a financial calculator, or how to maybe make some creative different deal structures. I'll tell you what I used to do. Jimmy gave out, but now he's been gone for a while, but he gave out like 75 business cards, and I don't know how many it was. And on each business card, it was a creative way to do a deal. So when I would go visit people to buy properties from them, I would go through those business cards. By the way, I still have those. I would go through those business cards, and they had like a creative problem, or a problem and a creative solution. And I would just memorize that. Then when I would go talk to people, I'd have that kind of in the front of my mind, and then I could put the deals together. I've since then, for me, I did it for myself, is I rewrote all those cards to fit the life that I live, the deals that I try to put together. And so I rewrote those and then I added probably 30 or 40 more cards to that. So I'm over 100 cards now. And basically, I'll just go through those cards. And if you go through those cards a few times, you'll be surprised. You'll be sitting in front of somebody, or you'll be working with somebody, or somebody's trying to put a deal together, and you'll know how to put that deal together in a creative way. And when you can do that, you'll be surprised. It's like deals that other people are walking away from, we can make money with. And you just got to practice that. You got to work that. You got to make real estate your passion. You know, when I go on a vacation, I usually go hang out with creative real estate investors. I mean, that's my passion. So, in fact, I was supposed to go to Ohio last week, and I was too busy. But one of the most creative guys alive was going to be there. And
Ray, you referenced a couple minutes ago. You referenced a book. What was the title of that book?
Invest in Debt.
Invest in Debt.
Right. Yeah.
One of our students is like, "Can I have some of those cards?" So that class, yeah.
There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on those cards, James. I don't know if they're still legible.
Now everybody wants them. So Ray just mentioned about possibly putting together a class. If you guys would be of interest to that, write the word class in the comments and we'll work on getting that set up if there's enough interest there. And we'll take one question. This topic is, you know, it literally can be a full day class. As Ray mentioned, it took him 10 years to get to where he knows what he knows today about subject 2. But if you guys have a question about subject 2, go ahead and drop it. We got about 8 minutes left before we start wrapping up. So we'll answer one question. Do you have anything else to add on those 2 deals that we were talking about from earlier? The one that you did with Charles?
Well, one of them was pretty interesting. Well, one of them was to a real estate investor. We sold it to a real estate investor, and he was paying us a higher interest rate for several years, and he ended up finally being able to get financing and cash us out. So all that stuff we put together, he undid. It was good because we had a good spread for several years. The other one was, it was actually, in a lot of ways, the other one we made a lot more money with. It was a situation where we bought the house on a sub 2. We did a wraparound. The people defaulted. So, and that's a lot of times people are like, well, what happens if they default? So they defaulted, and then we cleaned up the default. We took the house back. We turned around and sold it, and we were trying to sell it on another wraparound. And in this case, the people came along and offered us all cash or got bank financing for it. But because of the amount of time we had it, the values went up. So we never lost money on it the whole time we had it. But a lot of people think, well, what if you end up with a house back? In this case, when we ended up with a house back, the value that on the first wraparound, we captured how much that property went up in value. And so we made an additional probably, I want to say $50,000 or $100,000 an increase in value. Plus there was a pay down on the mortgage and stuff like that. So after all the attorney fees, real estate fees, we cleared over $100,000 on that one property. So, and we had a bad thing happen. We had to take the house back, and it turns out we made just as much money. What I regret is that we'd have made over the life of that loan, instead of making $150,000, we probably netted about $150,000 on that property. Instead of netting $150,000, we'd have probably netted $400,000 on one property. So that's why I didn't like getting it back. Now, if I needed the money, that'd be fine. But now what I got, I have a tax problem because now I have to pay a lot of taxes. By the way, we've fixed that problem. Almost everything we buy now is in a Roth IRA. So that problem's pretty much done.
So we do have a question coming in. There was another question in the chat that I don't quite understand. It was referring to funding, but one question that just came in: how do you trigger somebody in foreclosure to return your call? You know, like, so on your marketing or anything like that, you know, what is one tactic or one thing you can do that will entice people to return calls? Because I know people in foreclosure, they can be difficult to deal with.
Yeah, because their life's in upheaval, you know, and they view everybody that's out there to buy that property as a vulture. You know, and not everybody feels that way, but you've got that. I think you got to have a heart where you really want to help the people. And, you know, there on foreclosures, there's lots of ways people reach out to people who are being foreclosed on. Sometimes the people knock on the doors. Sometimes people send direct mail. Sometimes people send text. Sometimes people will do cold calling. You know, cold calling is very, very difficult, and it's a numbers game. And I think you have to genuinely put their interest real high on your list. And like we've seen, like we do role playing with our students, and we've actually gone out with our students, like on door knocking, which is, you know, so as an introvert, I hate doing that, but when you make money with it, it kind of breaks you with hating something. And when you're dealing with a person, you have to figure out how to solve their problem. And if you can solve their problem and be fair in the process, you're going to get more people to pay attention to you and listen to you. By the way, you remember I was telling you, James, we did the wire group for Alamo Ria. I did the presentation. Basically, I did a dual presentation, and it really turned out good. I did one presentation at the same as kind of doing both, running them together. But I said, look, here's the scripts. Here's like a foreclosure scripts. Here's the questions you ask. Here's how you talk to the people. Then we got the cliff notes of how to win friends and influence people. And we run them together, and you'll be surprised how if you don't understand how to win friends and influence people, the script doesn't matter. If you can't get people to know, trust, and like you, then you're never going to get on first base with them. So the key is to understand how to deal with people and communicate with them. Is there a right answer? There's a lot of variables, but the people have to genuinely believe that you can be worth them listening to. They got to trust you. They got to believe that you have a chance to help them. So if I was going to help somebody, if my goal was to talk to those people, then I would look at and see what problem they're trying to solve and give them that solution. And that's what my offer would be. And remember, on a foreclosure, they're doing their best to say no, stop talking to me as quick as possible. So the first thing out of your mouth better be about what you can do for them.
Yeah, and I guess your marketing too. Your marketing has to come across in a way that you're there to help them solve their problem. You're not there to take their property. You're not there to buy their property. You know, even though that is your intention, but your bigger intention is to solve their problem. And I think if you can communicate that in your marketing or your text or your voicemail or whatnot, you know, I think, you know, you can increase your chances of getting better response on that.
And it's a numbers game, you know, because like if you look at it, even people in foreclosure, motivation is a curve. So it goes like this, something happens and it goes like that. And if you're talking to them when their motivation is down here, they're probably not going to be real responsive. If you're talking to them when it's here, they're going to be real responsive. So for example, in a foreclosure, that might be when they first get the notice that you got a huge spike. It also might be when they realize that the deal that they signed with that other investor is not going to go through. That might be the best time to talk to them. So so you look at when your foreclosures are, like in Texas, it's the first Tuesday of the month. So they might be thinking around Thursday or Friday, hey, these dumb schools were supposed to close with me, and now they're not returning my calls. So as an investor, you might want to be talking to them right there, because that's when the realization is, hey, I'm out of time. Right? So when you show up and how often you show up will help build that trust and that confidence, and maybe get them to talk to you when they're interested in talking to you.
All right, well, we have hit 6:50 now, and that is about our time. Do you have one last closing thought, Ray, and then we'll close out?
Now, the only thing is, you and I do a good job, I think. Sometimes I'm real busy, like the last 4 days, I've been super busy. In fact, I'll be working late tonight, helping a couple of our students get deals. We get busy, but I really try hard to answer good questions on the forum. And the more specific your question is, the more likely I am to answer, because I'm not going to write a book. You know, I'll share with you, if you ask a really good question on massive passive, I'll do my best to answer it. I just, you know, if it's more than 3 or 4 lines, I'm not gonna, I just don't have time to just type out long answers. So, yeah, ask questions there. Me and James made it our duty to watch that. We also got Pat, who's the king of rehab. He watches it, and if whoever's has expertise, we do our best. And there's a lot of other smart people in massive passive, and a lot of those people come up with really good answers. So just try to qualify, you know, if somebody's not done any real amount of deals, I mean, you want to qualify that. But there's lots of people on massive passive that done hundreds of deals. So definitely post down there and ask your questions.
Don't be shy. Ask your questions, you know, because I'm sure somebody else will have the same question. We'll go through and answer. So on that note, we will see you guys. Remember, every Wednesday, we'll be back here next Wednesday at 6 p.m. I think next week we're actually going to have a special guest on. And then, so it'll be a good show again next week. And then we also have our radio show and podcast on Saturday that will be should be streamed on YouTube as well. So on that note, we will see you guys in the future. And yeah, y'all guys have a good evening.
See you next.
Tongue twisted.
Bye.